Visual: moonlight over a crumbling Georgia plantation house, wind rattling broken shutters. In 1847, a name was erased from the records of Georgia's soil. Not because she never lived, but because what she did could never be spoken aloud. They called her the Lady of Ashwood. A widow, a mother, and something else. Something the town swore to bury in silence. To this day, her house rots under the weight of secrets no sermon could cleanse. The camera lingers on blackened wood, claw marks on a cellar door, and portraits of pale-faced children with eyes too hollow for their years. In the background, chains drag faintly on stone. They said she bred laborers. That was common enough in Georgia's fields. But whispers say she bred them with her own blood, with the boys she raised beneath her roof, her sons and her slaves. Not for lust, not for love, but for a dynasty of control. For wealth made flesh. For a power that would never answer to God or law. 8 seconds in, we do not know her name. We only know this. Someone built a legacy on bodies and bloodlines, and the churchmen of that town sealed it shut. In the archives of rural Georgia, there are gaps. Ledgers burned, wills missing, census lines blotted with ink. Yet fragments survive. They speak of Ashwood Plantation, a sprawling estate 15 miles outside Augusta, said to be cursed long before its mistress arrived. Neighbors remembered her as a woman draped in black lace, a figure who walked among her fields at night, murmuring to the rows of cabins like a priest over tombstones. Children said she hummed lullabies in a language no one recognized. In the courthouse basement, one ledger remains. 1847. Handwriting jagged and uneven, as though written in haste. Born unto her sons, 3 in number, the brood is kept in the cellar. No baptism, no name, just flesh, just seed. No judge stamped the page, no clerk signed it. It was found, years later behind loose stone, its ink still sharp as though time refused to rot the words. The records are silent after that year, yet rumors ripple across generations. Some say her descendants walk among us still, their eyes dark mirrors of something older, something bred in captivity and sanctified in sin. To understand the Lady of Ashwood, we must trace the land itself. Before her, Ashwood was a battlefield, Cherokee hunting ground seized by colonial soldiers, then a cotton empire soaked in blood. The soil itself was described as black, thicker than tar, richer than bone meal, as though it grew fat on centuries of human remains. The plantation's chapel, built in 1812, leaned on a foundation of broken gravestones taken from the first burial ground of enslaved people in the region. Services were held every Sunday, but parishioners complained of whispers in the rafters, voices that echoed when no one sang. The minister, in one surviving sermon, called it a place where the devil rehearses his choir. Into this inheritance stepped the lady. Widowed at 26, she turned grief into ritual. She spoke of legacy, of flesh as currency, of the womb as a ledger. To her, every child was a line of profit, every drop of blood an entry in a secret economy. The town pretended not to see. Cotton flowed from Ashwood like blood through a vein, feeding banks, merchants, even the church itself. And so the sermons softened. The neighbors kept their eyes low. No one questioned why she kept her sons from marrying, why she buried newborns in unmarked pits near the orchard, why the cries at night sometimes sounded less than human. Ashwood was more than a plantation. It was a factory for something unspeakable. In the summer of 1847, neighbors began to whisper of children, pale-skinned, sharp-eyed, who never left the plantation gates. They did not attend school, nor church, nor the gatherings of youth that shaped the small towns of Georgia. But travelers claimed to see them, standing in rows along the veranda, watching, silent, their hair black as coal, their skin neither white nor black, but something in between, a shade unsettling to those who caught even a glimpse. A merchant from Savannah described a girl no older than 8. She watched me pass with eyes that seemed to know my name before I spoke it. It was as though she was listening to a voice that wasn't mine, yet answered me all the same. These children were the lady's grandchildren, born of her slaves, fathered by her sons. The townsfolk pretended they did not exist. But rumors spread of deformities, of screams carried on the wind, of infants drowned in buckets when they came out too strange to bear. What chilled those few who spoke of it was not just the births, but the fact that the lady treated each child as an investment. She charted their growth, their tempers, their uncanny memory. She kept ledgers that read less like family trees and more like inventories. Ashwood was becoming less a home than a laboratory, and its mistress less a grieving widow than a priestess of some unholy experiment. Religion in the South was meant to be the great moral anchor, yet in Ashwood's shadow, it became the loudest silence. The town's church sat barely 3 miles from the plantation gates, but no minister dared to challenge her. Why? Because Ashwood kept them alive. Her cotton funded their steeple repairs, her tithes doubled their coffers, and her influence stretched into the courts. To oppose her was to starve. To speak her name in accusation was to vanish from the records. One pastor's journal survives hidden in a hollow hymnal. His words tremble with fear. Her sons do not come to worship. They are kept within, as beasts in a pen. Yet I have seen their shadows pass across the chapel window when no carriage arrived. The lady told me once that she had bred a line that would never bow to death. I laughed, though my throat burned. I have not laughed since. The church bells tolled for every death in the town, but never for the infants buried in Ashwood's orchard. Never for the mothers who disappeared after their wombs were emptied. The lady did not need forgiveness. She did not ask for it. The town, bound by its hunger for wealth and its terror of exposure, became her accomplice. In every silence, they signed her covenant. The deeper one studies Ashwood, the clearer it becomes. This was no random cruelty. It was ritual. The lady spoke often of purity, not in sermons of Christian faith, but in arithmetic of flesh. She claimed that by merging her bloodline with the enslaved, she could forge a stock immune to weakness, immune to fear. She treated bodies as equations, wombs as engines, children as vessels for a future only she could see. Witnesses describe her nightly processions, sons led down into the cellar, women lined in silence, trembling but bound. The lady watching with candle, her face pale as bone, lips moving as though in prayer. What was spoken in that room no one alive could say. But neighbors claimed that after these nights, the land itself groaned. Cattle miscarried, wells turned foul, infants in town were born with teeth. Her philosophy was simple. God's laws were written by men. Flesh, however, told its own story. Flesh could be edited, shaped, rewritten like scripture. And so, year by year, Ashwood became not just a plantation, but a shrine to her own perverse gospel. But every shrine breeds its curse, and the lady would not be spared hers. Every birth at Ashwood required a midwife, but midwives rarely returned. Records from Augusta show names of 3 women hired in 1846, each summoned to the plantation for service, each never seen again. Their families begged for answers, but the sheriff dismissed them. Likely runaway. Yet no trace was ever found. Whispers spread that the lady silenced them, because they knew too much. They saw the children before she hid them, saw what should never have survived the womb. One midwife's bloodied bonnet was discovered years later, buried under the roots of an old oak near the cabins. The cloth was stiff, stained deep, and wrapped around something worse. A jawbone too small to belong to an adult, too human to belong to an animal. The townspeople stopped asking questions. They stopped looking her in the eye. And so the births continued. The cries muffled by cellar walls, the women erased as efficiently as lines from a ledger. The lady's 3 sons grew into strange, twisted men. They never left the estate, never courted wives, never spoke openly in town. Farmhands described them as pale, muscular, and silent. They worked only at night, their eyes burning in lamplight, their words muttered in fragments like broken psalms. One visitor claimed he saw them moving in the orchard at midnight, each carrying a child. The children were placed in the earth as if planted. Hours later, the visitor swore the ground shifted, as if something beneath it stirred. Neighbors believed The lady had broken them, that she had turned her sons from men into instruments, nothing more than extensions of her will. They existed to breed, to seed, to follow rituals that no scripture could cleanse. And when their bodies gave out, when sickness hollowed their lungs, rumors said the lady forced her slaves to bleed for them, to keep them alive. A grotesque communion, a mockery of resurrection. The sons of Ashwood were not men. They were shadows shaped into flesh. Ashwood's orchard bore the sweetest peaches in the county. Juicy, thick-skinned, impossibly ripe. The market loved them. The church feasts were filled with them. But beneath their roots lay rot. Farm hands whispered that for every fruit sold, a body was buried. Infants who cried wrong. Mothers who resisted. Midwives who spoke out. The orchard was a graveyard, its fruit swollen with the marrow of the dead. A traveler's diary from 1851 recalls biting into one of those peaches. The flesh was red, not gold. Sweet, yes, but too sweet, as though I tasted blood hidden in sugar. I spat it out, yet my tongue burned for days. No one in town would admit it, but they all ate Ashwood's fruit. They consumed the lady's secret, ingested it, depended on it. And so the orchard grew fat, season after season, fed by death and denial. When the Civil War came, soldiers camped in those fields, few left unscarred. Some swore the trees whispered to them, promising mercy, promising survival, if they would only bow to the lady's line. The orchard never stopped blooming. Not even in drought, not even in war. When the Civil War erupted, plantations burned across Georgia. Armies marched, families fled, blood flooded the fields. Yet Ashwood stood untouched. Union soldiers were ordered to torch it. But the diaries of a captain reveal a chilling account. We approached at dawn. The air grew heavy, so heavy our horses refused the road. Then we saw the house, shadows in every window, faces staring, though no one stood there. The men panicked. Muskets failed. Fire would not catch. We abandoned it for fear the place itself would consume us. Locals believed the lady struck a bargain. Whether with men of power or with something older, no one dared say. While neighbors starved, she feasted. While homes crumbled, Ashwood grew fat with profit. The war raged around her. But the lady's empire was not built on cotton. It was built on blood. And blood, unlike armies, could not be burned away. In 1867, with the South in ruins, wagons of orphans began arriving at Ashwood. Children too young to recall their parents displaced by war, gathered from burned towns and ruined farms. No one knew who sent them. Some claimed officials in Augusta were bribed to relieve the burden. Others whispered the lady herself petitioned for them, asking her request in the language of charity. Witnesses described lines of thin, silent children herded into the plantation gates. None were ever seen again. The lady's experiments continued with fresh bodies unmarked by local bloodlines. The orphans were blank slates, vessels, and the cellar became a nursery of shadows. One rumor still lingers in family lore. A child escaped. A boy no older than 10 found wandering near the river, barefoot and feverish. He raved about the mothers in cages and the children that walked on all fours. He died within a week. His burial was unmarked. His words were forgotten. Ashwood consumed them all. By the 1870s, whispers spread of children leaving Ashwood. Not fleeing, leaving. Sent into the towns, they appeared in markets trading peaches. They entered schools briefly, only to vanish weeks later. Their eyes unsettled teachers, their laughter too rehearsed, their silences too heavy. One girl was taken in by a pastor's family. Within a month, their livestock lay dead. Their youngest son drowned in the well, their home gutted by fire. The girl was gone. Another boy was apprenticed to a blacksmith. Customers swore his hands burned cold. His hammer fell in strange rhythms like a heartbeat reversed. One morning he was found in the forge, body unburned though flames raged around him. The lady had begun seeding her brood into the world. Children born of bloodlines no scripture could name. Children who carried Ashwood inside them. Not all survived. But enough did, and with each one, the town sank deeper into a silence it would never break. By the late 19th century, Augusta's outskirts bore signs of rot no doctor could name. Infants born with translucent skin, mothers wasting away after childbirth, men driven to violence by dreams they swore were not there. The physicians wrote of malarial fevers, the Priests blamed moral weakness, but those who lived closest to Ashwood knew the truth. The plantation's shadow had seeped into their blood. Farmers swore the lady's brood walked among them, indistinguishable until nightfall, when their eyes reflected lantern light like a predator's. Children whispered of classmates who moved without sound, who knew secrets no one had told them, who laughed at funerals and wept at weddings. The disease was not one of flesh. It was inheritance. It was legacy. It was a sickness carried in silence, and still no one spoke her name. By 1880, the lady should have been long dead. But she lived on, her body unchanged, her presence undiminished. Travelers described her as impossibly tall, her black dresses swallowing the light, her skin pale but unwrinkled. She moved with the stiffness of a corpse and the authority of a monarch. One man swore she walked barefoot across her orchard, snow crunching beneath her in midwinter, her breath never visible. Rumors spread that she had bound her life to the children she birthed through others. Each child fed her years. Each grave bought her more time. Her sons, gray and sickly, wasted in her service while she glided untouched, as if time itself bent to her will. The town feared her not as a woman but as a relic, an artifact of some bargain they could neither name nor break. Ashwood was no longer a plantation. It was her body, and her body refused to rot. Some could not hold their silence. They spoke, trembling of what they had seen, and madness claimed them. A schoolteacher confessed to hearing children in her class whispering inside her head. She was found one morning hanging from the rafters, eyes gouged out, the words "no more lessons" carved into the wall. A doctor attempted to expose the orchard graves. He dug until dawn, but when townsfolk found him, his shovel was broken, and his hands were worn to bone from clawing the earth. He lived 3 days, repeating only, "The roots have teeth." The sheriff once tried to summon federal men to investigate. His letter was never sent. His body was discovered in his office, mouth stuffed with peach blossoms. One by one, those who resisted either vanished, died, or went mad. The lady never lifted a hand. She didn't need to. Ashwood itself punished those who spoke, and so the silence deepened, century after century. On a stormless night in 1901, Ashwood burned. Locals awoke to a column of smoke blotting the moon. Flames devoured the plantation house, sparks leaping higher than the trees. And yet, no screams, no cries, no fleeing figures. When the townsfolk gathered at dawn, the house was nothing but charred skeleton walls. But the orchard still bloomed, green and lush, untouched by flame. The lady's body was never recovered, nor were her sons. No bones, no ash, no trace of flesh. Only a cracked portrait remained, its paint blistered, her black eyes staring from the ruin with unbroken calm. Some swore the fire was no accident, that the town finally acted, that men soaked the house in kerosene and struck the match. But if so, they never confessed, for the fire destroyed nothing. The lady was gone, but her presence lingered. Ashwood was dead and yet alive. After the fire, children began to appear in nearby towns, unclaimed, unnamed, eerily familiar. A girl in Savannah, pale and silent, who traced spirals on every wall until her foster parents locked her in the cellar. A boy in Charleston whose blood never clotted, who smiled at the sight of knives. A pair of twins in Augusta, who never blinked, never spoke yet answered questions with perfect synchronicity. No one dared say it aloud, but the truth spread in whispers. The lady's brood had survived. The fire had scattered them, not destroyed them. Worse, some married, some had children of their own, and the strange traits multiplied. Eyes too black, voices too deep, children who dreamed of orchards they had never seen. Ashwood's bloodline had seeped into the nation itself, and there would be no erasing it. In 1924, travelers claimed the house was standing again, not rebuilt by human hands, but risen, its walls warped, its timbers blackened, its windows glowing faintly though no lantern burned. Photographs from that year show only trees and shadows. Yet in the negatives, faint outlines appear, columns, balconies, a roof half-formed, as if the house itself clawed back from the grave. Those who ventured too close vanished. A hunter left his hounds tied at the gate. When he returned, their leashes lay in ash, their bodies gone. Children dared each other to approach the orchard, only to return pale, muttering words in languages no one knew. The lady may have died in fire, but her house, her land, her blood, none of it died with her. Ashwood refused to stay buried. By the 1930s, rumors of Ashwood had reached scholars. Folklorists, historians, even psychologists traveled south to unearth the truth. Most left with nothing, at least nothing they dared publish. One professor from Yale documented his findings in a private journal, recovered after his death. "I found graves, but not of ordinary kind. Infant skulls fused to animal bones, teeth too many for any child. Wombs preserved in jars, buried beneath the chapel ruins. This was no plantation. This was a breeding ground for something she believed was greater than man." His notes ended abruptly with the words, "It still walks." Others who visited Ashwood in those years returned broken. One woman tore out her own tongue, claiming it spoke when she slept. Another drowned herself in a hotel basin, scrawling, "Roots have teeth" on the mirror in her own blood. The state sealed the land in 1941, citing public safety. Yet no official report exists. The files are missing, the photographs destroyed, and the orchard still blooms, fruit fat and red, sweet beyond reason. The silence of Ashwood was not broken. It was enforced. Today, Ashwood is gone from maps. The road is overgrown. The house collapsed into ruin. But the orchard still bears fruit, and some say it is sweeter now than ever. Locals whisper of families with strange eyes, of children who speak in voices not their own, of dreams that taste of peaches. Bloodlines twisted long ago now walk unnoticed in our cities, in our churches, in our schools. The lady's name has vanished. Her portraits are ash, but her gospel of blood was never buried. It lives in flesh, in silence, in every secret we refuse to face. When you bite into sweetness too sharp, when you see eyes too black in the face of a child, when you hear whispers in the orchard wind, remember this: some histories are not past, some legacies are not dead, and some houses never truly burn. The Lady of Ashwood is waiting, still.